countdown. We're just going to try to go live. Hey, everybody. Okay, here we are. Hopefully this is working. We had like a slight technical error going live with this, but we are here now streaming, and I am so glad to welcome folks.
Okay. I think we're here. Okay.
Whoa.
Things are good. Things are good.
The roller coaster. Viditya, can you hear me?
I can't hear you. I think I had a bunch of streams because I had all of our pages open and they all started the live stream. Oh. Let me double check. I don't have anything else going on.
Yes, I had the same thing going. I had your crowdfunding page open and I had to close it, but I think I can just only hear your voice through this video now. So now we can go ahead. Are you good on your end as well?
I think I am. I think this is all good.
Amazing.
Cool.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna do my intro.
Yeah, let's take it from the top.
Everyone, welcome. Word, yes. Everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Nat Mesnard. I am the designer of Assemblage, and I am so excited to be streaming today with Viditya Voleti, who is the designer and writer behind A Land Once Magic. And we're joining for a short stream just to talk about our projects and connect about two projects that have a lot in common. I think we've got some really great resonances connected with designing world building games. And the two of us both teach game design in New York City. So there's a natural alliance between these two projects that we wanted to share with you. But first of all, I wanted to welcome you, Viditya, and hopefully setting aside all technical errors rolling into the live. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
How are you feeling about A Land Once Magic and where you're at with the campaign?
I am doing good. I feel like anytime I touch the screen, something futzes, so I'm just going to stop touching it. Hi everybody. Yeah, I'm Viditya Voleti. I'm the designer of A Land Once Magic. Things are going well. I'm very excited about the game, and I love the Pocketopia community that we're a part of. And I have kind of immediately forgotten a lot of the other stuff that I should be saying.
That's all good. Yeah, you don't have to say anything.
I don't gotta say anything.
Exactly. Except talking about your game. So hopefully this will work. It keeps kind of stuttering, which is why we're like having a little bit of an awkward back and forth, but I think it's settled down now.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So we were going to start out by talking about your project, and I wanted to kick this off by saying that I had this project before it was cool because I have this.
Oh, yay.
So I officially get to be A Land Once Magic hipster. But so hearkening back to the creation of this, I wanted to ask you about it because I imagine there was some really cool inspiration that went into creating this, and I wanted to hear a little bit of storytelling about what led you to write it back when it was this staple-bound zine.
Mm-hmm. I was actually going to ask, do you have the staple-bound version or the thread-bound version? Because I think you have even an older version than the one. Yeah. Oh, you have it there. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's not staple bound. Actually, I was saying that just sort of out of routine, but in fact, it is sewn together with green thread.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's also an era. Is I was like, oh, I can like stitch this actually, and it's very quick because I lost my zine stapler and I got very upset about that. So I know exactly the era of the Land Once Magic zine that you have. Yeah, I don't know. So the original zine started, I think very zine-y is what it is. I have another game called Space Between Stars, which is like a sci-fi space opera GM-less game. And the thing that I really liked about that game is you world build the world and then you make characters in it and then take it through like a full campaignable game. So like you build that world up from the ground up with some world building tables, and it just at some point, I think maybe like a year after I finished that game for my undergrad thesis, actually, I was like, oh, I kind of want to try a fantasy version of it. And like, what better to do that than to just take the table formats, change up some questions, and then just like figure it out. And so it initially was just like a Google Doc that I posted on itch that had all the tables. And then I think maybe like a year or two later, I was like, you know what? I want to like kind of stretch my layout skills again because it's been a hot while. So like I then was like, oh, what? I already have this text. It's a small zine game. And then I like tried out some print layout, or I just made it look nicer. Not even print layout. I just like made it look a little nicer. It actually like specifically was like kind of phone size, so each table fits on your phone screen nicely. And then maybe like a year later, I was like, oh, you know what? Like, or like when we were kind of going back into conventions, or when I was kind of going back to conventions in like 2023, 22, 23. I was like, you know what? I miss like handing stuff out to people, or I kind of don't have a lot of physical stuff. So I looked to my games and went, what games do I have that I can make like printed home zines with? And then so I had a Land Once Magic, and it like was very easy to do, print out, cut small. It's like 8 pages, 8 like sheets of paper total, which is like very manageable. And then that became the zine version. So I like Land Once Magic really feels like a Zinesters game because of just like each kind of iteration that happened, not because it is a product that I wanted to make, but instead like an exercise for me just kind of learning art forms or exploring into further and further. Yeah, like a hack of my own game, and then layout practice, and then print practice, and then I like it, and because of that I got to spread it around. I got to play it a bunch, and then I was like, you know what, I want to do like an actual print of it. Like let's actually make like a kind of a small print run of it. That then small print run bloated a smidge into ASICs open, like, and then now it's also an exploration of like what's like some fun printing methods that we could figure out and try. So it's like still kind of an artistic expression in that regard.
That's awesome. I love projects that organically continue to exist like that. Like it's a little seed and then it kind of just expands over time because it's been a part of your life that's meaningful to you. Like thinking about just, before we went live, we were talking about the relationship between game publishing and poetry publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something different though between like writing a game and writing poetry, where there's this like publishing threshold you cross where it's like, okay, now it's published and it's the sort of canonical version is in print now. And games are just so much more dynamic in how you kind of grow them from this single seed of a thing and reformat them, adding kind of accumulatively to make them work for different formats and situations.
Yeah, it's like the version you take to cons and you play test is like a real version of that game, and then like the version that you make for online play, and then like your kind of early access stuff, and then the PDF is kind of a different version than the actual print version. I think you're right. Like that's actually really fun. It's this like organic, you nurture it until it becomes, and like, like maybe the print version isn't necessarily like final either, right?
Yes.
Like it just now is in the form of it's in stores now, like, or it can be sold at a store. And Yeah.
Yes. Oh, you're nurturing. We're parenting a game.
We're
It's the
parenting.
I love it. I love it. No, I really feel like that. I mean, it takes the pressure, the creative pressure off of like sort of legislatively dictating that this game or whatever, this work of art I've made is done now, which is like a source of much paranoia and stress, I think, for many artists, especially writers, saying like, it never feels done, right? And like, it doesn't have to be done when it's a game.
Yeah. Tony Vicinda, who plus 1 EXP, told me like a really nice thing where because he printed Longsword, which is one of my other games, and I was like, oh, Tony, but like, you know, it's like a small game and like it's gotten some play tests, but I know it can be a little better. And Tony just goes, hey, we have 2nd editions and 3rd editions, like let's print this version, and if you need to make some big changes, we'll print another version. And that just like relieved so much stress off of me that like this game didn't need to be perfect, because he's just like, yeah, I don't know, we'll do like a print run and then we'll do another one if it sells well, you know, like, and I'm like, oh, you're right. Yeah. Okay, yeah, cool, like, great. Yeah. Or just like update a digital version and we'll point people to like, oh, by the way, there's like an errata on the website, and if they care, they care. And I'm like, oh, you're right. You know,
yeah, like, that's so nice.
It was very nice.
Well, I want to ask you to talk a little bit about what's in the book too. Like we're being nerdy about books because I think we both share like a love of print objects, but like I also wanted to ask you to talk about the game, and we had some really cool conversations. So right before we went live, we were talking about this too, and we were just talking about the sort of tagline for this is post-fantasy world building. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. I think this zine is really good about helping people avoid world building cliches and just some of the sort of standard world building stuff folks can get into with imitating Tolkien and so forth. And I'm curious what post-fantasy world building means to you. And then also like how some of the structures and tools that are in the game kind of make good on this kind of like anti-cliche idea of being like in a post-fantasy landscape.
Yeah, I think I can kind of answer both in the same sentence, kind of, because post-fantasy is a bit of a made-up term that felt right. You know, it's like any other artistic term where you're like, oh, I'm a cubist because these are cubes, and post-fantasy is like, this is post-fantasy because it's trying to think about fantasy outside of itself. And immediately for me, it's like the tool that does it is like palette and touchstones are 2 things that are like immediate in the game. And it's because palette are like descriptive words. You're going to get like a handful of descriptive words that the table all chooses, even before you like have a picture in your brain of like what's going to happen, that start to kind of like get everybody on like a vibe. And I think like that already starts to pull it away because you're thinking about your world in the abstract rather than in like, we're making a fantasy world, so you know what that means, right? Instead it's like, all right, our world is like is frigid, it's gold, it's melodious, and it's like roaring. Like these are like, you know, descriptive words that you're like, oh, okay, what could that mean? And so it's already kind of breaking it out. And then touchstones, I think, are a big thing where I'm then explicit. So rather than the like kind of vague, flowery, poetic way of palette, touchstones, I'm just like, all right, bring something that's not fantasy that you're interested in. And then that just explicit being like, it can't be a fantasy touchstone. You really have to pull away from like something that would be considered fantasy. And then people bring in just like weird stuff. And I love it. The text in the book says Cowboy Bebop because I really like Cowboy Bebop. Yeah. So it's like, here's like a space sci-fi thing. But then people have done like Legally Blonde or House MD or just like 90s commercials. Like that's just a vibe, like the chaotic energy of 90s toy commercials. And like, you're like, great. And then even if the questions that I wrote are like asking you to kind of think about and deconstruct what a normal fantasy world would do, you're thinking about all of them. Like I use the word caravan as like transportation. Like I very specifically was like, what common transportation method do caravans use? Because caravans feel fantasy. They feel like an older time in that like kind of fantasy is replicating the past sort of way. But then, you know, you're like, you're not thinking about it as like, oh, it's just wagons. Caravan means wagons. Instead, you're like, what's drawing these caravans? Or like, could they be hovering? Or like, are they trains or something? Right. So, yeah, I think that's kind of the thing there that really pulls it out.
I love that people are like immediately sitting down with this, like, yes, 90s commercials. Like that's like, that is such a coherent like genre conceit that like wouldn't have occurred to me, but like that's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. It's truly, and I always worry that I need to push people to do something to like, it's one of those like through playtesting, I keep going like, do I need to like push people to give an interesting touchdown? And every time I play, I don't really say much as a facilitator. And then people go, oh, okay. Yeah. I think the one thing that's not in the book that I do say is I go, if you're having trouble, what's something that you're currently watching or reading that you're into, and just like bring it in, you know? And I think that also helps where they're just like, okay, I guess like I'm watching Severance. That was a game that I played in that was like, somebody's watching, I think it was actually the one shot episode, but it's like, I'm watching Severance right now. Let's talk about Severance. And that like radically changed how we thought about our world, right? Like, because Severance is so specifically, it's not fantasy in any regard. And that's fun.
So if you were to pick Severance, for example, and then kind of going through the rest of the book, my sense is that there is some kind of specific questions that are asked in here that direct without like forcing certain themes to come up in the storytelling that happens. This is a spoiler, but you told me that a lot of the time people realize that there are elements of their world that resonate with climate change. And I'm curious because that seems like a very serious and awesome like discovery to have about the way your world is functioning through this specific set of prompts. How does that play out when someone was like, I don't know, like, let's have it be 90s commercials crossed with Severance. And then also there is grief. Like, I'm curious what that looks like in play, because I actually haven't had a chance to play this yet. And I want to know like what it feels like to be in the world.
I think like, I'm also kind of curious about how this works myself. In a funny way, like it kind of does. And I think the reason is A Land Once Magic is a very zoomed out game. So you never embody specifics. You kind of craft from above. And you do zoom in, like you do get into stuff, but there's never any scenes and you're never like thinking about like a specific person or a specific group. And I think that allows for like almost a separation of like, oh, magic is like what, like, you know, it's like magic is changing, and you describe that like, oh, magic is withering away slowly, but like it's dying and this tether is breaking. Like, how does wildlife change? And then you're not like, so like even if it's kind of wacky and fun, you still are like, oh, it's probably like, you know, we're probably driving that, like, you know, whatever wells that they went to are drying up because we keep pulling from it for our cool like slime action, whatever. It's like, you know, it's like it's I think it's actually just being away from it allows for people to like put everything in instead of this like character or this like, yeah, you get what I'm saying?
I do. I what I'm hearing there is like we can have like multiple kinds of like emotional landscapes within the physical landscape that's being described, because we're not all only embodying a clownish 90s cartoon character, although we could imagine such characters being in the world. It's kind of like a bigger tapestry of descriptors and references and then responses to the prompts. So we can like kind of take responsibility for the big picture, and then like it gives us access kind of to everything in a way. Which is awesome.
That's a good way to put it. I actually really like how you said that. Take responsibility for the big picture, and is, I think, like exactly what it is.
Yeah. Well, so I also feel like I want to switch and talk about my project.
Yes, I want to make sure we have time.
That, but also this idea of like being zoomed out is really core to the design of my game also. And I think that we're drawing from a similar well in terms of what expository role playing grants people. Because in my game also, there's less zooming in to like role play as creatures. Mm-hmm. And I love that like you're kind of extolling the benefits of doing that instead of regarding it as a flaw, because it's actually a strength of projects like this to be able to kind of look at it on that large scale. And I want us to be able to talk about that, but we have to route through my project to do it, so we can do the intersection.
And I think there's something fun there, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna switch colors.
Yeah, switch the colors.
Oh, it's blue because my game is blue, and then now you get to be on that
side. Yay! All right, Nat. I'm very excited to talk to you about Assemblage. Because I think we are doing a lot of similar stuff, and I love how you are. I mean, I kind of want to start with essentially that through line. And I kind of have a question that's about this, which is like, you are taking, like, you know, we're building stuff up, and specifically you're building like ecologies and like species and these things that like, I kind of in a way I think about like we mentioned, like, you know, our games are our babies, but like kind of in a similar way, like you're building up a species, like a thing that you're attached to. And then you see it all break down. Then they now need to go through survival and all this, you know, a calamity happens and we have to survive. I am very curious about like how you kind of get players excited to build it up and then encourage them to then break it down and kind of dig into, I wrote like dig into disaster as kind of the core of this. And I think that's like the intersection that we're also talking about.
Yeah, I'm so interested in this, like, and just also, we'll talk about the connections, but let me go into like how I get players excited first, because I think that's such a fantastic question. So yeah, I mean, I always talk about this with this game. It's based on, or I was inspired by a book, and the book is called The Mushroom at the End of the World. And Google that up, because like it's such an awesome book. And this book is about these mushrooms called matsutake mushrooms, and they only grow in logged out forests, or at least they're much more likely to grow in landscapes that have been like heavily intervened on by like capitalist economies. And there is the book is a nonfiction book that's like an eco-anthropology of these mushrooms and the like global economies of trade around this specific mushroom, because it's like this incredibly like valuable gourmet mushroom that like Japanese chefs like value very highly, and apparently they're delicious. And there are people that go pick them who live in these like logged out forests and hunt for them. And I think like the thing that was interesting about that book that I wanted to capture in Assemblage was just the relationships that people have, that people and non-people, like the mushrooms and the other like creatures and organisms living in these like logged out forests are so interesting and so different from just sort of like normative storytelling about how global economies work and how people relate with nature.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, honestly, this is like a obvious truism, but relationships are interesting. And I personally, in role playing, really like it when I'm given a relationship as the first thing to come up with a character off of.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the relationship prompting in Dream Askew, which is very like centered on establishing character relationships as a means to generate collaborative storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
I often have a hard time making a character until I know how that character relates with another character in a party. And it's my biggest request. Like when I'm in Dungeons and Dragons games, I'm always like, what are our pre-established relationships? And I always want it to be like, can you be my parent? Or can you be my ex? Or can we like, can we be like 10 years of being coworkers or whatever? And so with Assemblage, I was like, I want people to do ecology creation through ecological relationships. And the hook for that is, okay, we're making up species. I'm a parasite of you.
That's really interesting.
And then immediately we're like, okay, great. I love that idea. I'm your parasite. And then I'm like, I live inside your stomach. And you're like, oh, excellent.
Okay, yeah.
Right? And there's something where people immediately, like, if you say that one sentence, people always have ideas for something somehow.
I do. Yeah. No, I mean, it's the beauty of the prompt, right? Is you go, okay, we're parasites.
Yeah.
Great. Like off to the races.
Yes.
You don't need a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So that like is the nugget that then people are like, so again, in Assemblage. So let's say I was your parasite and then someone to my right, then they were my predator. And so then it's like, okay, if someone is my predator and I'm your parasite and I live in your stomach, then they also live in your stomach. Or they catch you and eat you so they can eat me, right? And then like people are like, what is this? This is so weird. And it's very fun.
That's really fun. I read it. I get it on a game level, but for some reason it's now hitting me when you said it out loud. It's like, oh no, it's character relationships through ecological relationship.
Yeah.
Is so good. Like that's so good. That like it made sense to me, but it didn't click for me, and like I love that a lot. Because I was like gonna ask a question about like, well, this is like a science-based world building game. Is like you specify that, and like I was curious about like how you kind of built the foundations and like what research you did, and then also how do you get players to then engage in that without them having to have also done all of that research. I think that's like an important thing of any kind of I think about like educational games where it's like, oh, I'm trying to teach you something, but like play it. And this feels like, I don't need to be a scientist to play this game because I just understand ecology. So continuing this train of thought of like, how do you, what did you do to research this? And then how do you get players to just accept or play within scientific boundaries?
Yes, that is an excellent and a very smart question, because I love talking to game designers, because like that's exactly what I would ask with this game too. And I've thought a lot about this. So much like 90s cartoons, 90s commercials is what we were talking about. 90s commercials is a coherent genre conceit. Science is also a genre conceit. So the way it works in this game is I use the vocabulary that's associated with science as a genre conceit, but then the game is permissive of science fantasy, basically. So I actually have a part of the rules that is an explicit player contract that is encouraged to be read aloud at the beginning of the game, which says, you can do whatever you want with science. Science fans, scientists, and people who know nothing about science are equally invited to play in this space. You can bring what you know and make up what you don't. You can disobey the laws of physics and thermodynamics if it makes for better relationships.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
I actually, and I wrote that after a bunch of playtesting where I kind of had that in my head where I wanted people to just make up things that seem ecological, drawing on whatever vocabulary they know. Because like most people are like, I have some vocabulary, like I know what mitochondria is,
Right.
and I know what symbiosis is. And so I wanted people to use those terms. But then I did actually have a situation where a real ecologist play tested this game. And he knew too much and was like saying this wouldn't really happen.
Yeah.
And that was a really useful playtest for this issue because I had to actually tell people explicitly, like, it doesn't have to fit science. It just has to fit the genre conceit of science.
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it's like maybe this isn't a great, it's kind of like the Star Trek to the Star Wars, right? Where you're like, why do people like Star Trek? It's like, I mean, they're very different, but it's like, at least Star Trek has this veiled idea, this veiled, like there is science happening here. Like we could say, even though what we're saying is nonsense, we're still saying sciencey words to explain how a teleporter works. Well, in Star Wars is just like, I don't know, we have hyperspace because it's cool to go from one place to another. And so you're playing into the like, all right, like you can say sciencey words, and we're playing under the plausible deniability of like this works because we say it does.
Yeah, and like with the ecological relationships thing, it's not realistic. Like, because ideally you would have a food chain, which is a linear progression. And the relationships in this game are, it's a closed loop because every player has a relationship. And every player has a relationship with the person to their left and the person to their right.
Yeah.
And ecologies don't really work in a circle. That's a human community is in a circle at a TTRPG table. So it has to be a fantasy.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. It's also making me realize that I think like games I've played that are about ecologies, like board games and various other stuff, they also kind of create a circle, which is fake. Like it's, it's like, oh, the circle of life is like, you got the predators to the prey to the flora to the decomposers to the, you know what I mean? Like it's, oh, see, it's all a circle. But when you actually look at a food tree, it's a tree, or it's like, it branches and it kind of goes. I didn't even realize that itself is a genre conceit. Kind of
100%. Oh yes, and I mean, like, let's all role play scientists. Like, we know what to do.
I love that.
Yeah. So we've already been on for close to the time we wanted to stay here, but I want to talk about the resonances between the projects.
Yeah.
And I don't want to log off before we get a chance to do that. And so I feel like we should just linger on like because these are both role-playing projects. They're both kind of expository, by which I mean you get to narrate in this zoomed out way. And I want to pass to you to start because you were saying about how you were seeing some interesting connections between the two projects related with disaster. And I'd love for you to talk about your project's relationship with disaster and then maybe where you see that joining with Assemblage.
Well, so A Land Once Magic's kind of whole conceit is, or like, I guess in a way, like why I think it makes an interesting, exciting world to like kind of dig deeper in, is because you make a world that's built off of like its foundation is this magic system, and that magic and like, or the magic of your world is usually like deeply ingrained with society, like a cultural society. So it's, whatever, I don't use the term like it's like people in the world use magic and that magic is what kind of lets them build their worlds and how we live. And then to go, but now magic is changing. Thus, all that stability is starting to kind of break and falter. And A Land Once Magic, pretty specifically, and this is something that we were talking about prior to hitting record, is A Land Once Magic kind of doesn't take you to an end. It builds a lot of stuff, and then it goes, all right, see where it goes next. Like it leaves it open because it cares about like kind of broad stuff. So like players are creating moments of like, oh, hold on, like, you know, if magic lets us control gravity, we've started, like, our building process doesn't need to be like gravitationally sound because we can just like stasis something, you know what I mean?
Right,
like, you know,
right.
It's like things just float. But if magic is starting to disappear, things start falling. Like people are making those connections and going like, it's a lot of like, we've built something, and then I ask a question that's like, oh, what collapses when magic starts to change? And they go, our cities, you know, like, and then like, oh, and then that just kind of spirals. So I don't like take them through a necessary arc. I take them through an arc of scale. And so you start to think about the disaster on like kind of a broad scale, and then on a city scale, and then you go to like, people are traveling in this world, and what are they doing? Like, how is this affecting them? And that's kind of like I like the expository. I actually wrote that down. I was like, oh, it's expository role play, because I really like that term, because I think it like, you're not getting in the nitty gritty of how does this affect me or my people, but you're just like, it's a lot of those. I think in a similar scientific-y way, you would go like, it's questions and then like logical conclusions, right? You're like, if magic is now changing from something that we understand to something that we don't understand, or it's like magic is gaining sentience or whatever, like you come up with how it changes, you go, oh, well, we established this thing, so now it would change to this thing, and then the dominoes kind of start to fall.
That's so cool. That almost makes me think that the core character in the game is magic.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. Like, because like it's almost like because magic is like the core thing in a lot of world building that like makes the world different from our own. Mm-hmm. So it's like almost like you're making that quality be like the subject of like the core interrogation that people are doing when they're playing.
Yeah, that's like the fantasy, right? It's like fantasy is magic. So what if magic is being weird, or magic is I like magic as my main character. I don't also think I've ever necessarily said that, but it truly is.
Yeah. I think that's so brilliant. And like I just to draw the connection between the two projects, I think like you're kind of getting up to this precipice, because you're saying this core force is in a moment of transition or change. Yeah. And then like standing kind of looking ahead into that, it's like now you could play this with any number of systems to play to find out like, so what does that change mean to a group of people or a person or a town or whatever, and how is it playing out on the micro scale? Mm-hmm. So we have this sort of like leaping off point, and then in Assemblage, I'm like, we are going to grieve right now in this game. Yeah. So mine is very much like, there is actually not an impending disaster, but a present disaster that we're going to narrate the conclusion of.
Yeah, which like really excites me. I mean, you mentioned like dialect as like it's directly there as like, you know, the thing that an inspiration, and like that to me is like, it's not just building a language, it's building it to die. And I like, it's like, so you also are taking, I mean, like how zoomed in the way that I'm talking about A Land Once Magic is Assemblage, because you're picking these like you're creatures, like you're an ecology that's all this stuff. So grieving is a big part of that, I would assume, because you are more intimately connected to the thing that you're following from birth to death, right?
Yes. Yes, so that's a great question, and I will spoil the game on this stream, so anyone who watches it can be excited. But I mean, it's all publicly available. It's basically, so it's not really a secret, open secret. But what happens at the end of the game is actually it is a dictated arc, right? So there's a lot of creativity and freedom in it, but I love a narrative arc, and I wanted it to be a shorter game. So I'm like, there has to be something that happens. And what happens is one species is voted to be the species that becomes extinct.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So rules as written is we decide one species in the assemblage to become extinct. All other species by fiat of the rules must survive. So essentially what occurs is everyone decides together based on what's happened before which species makes sense to have the one that goes extinct.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the extinction and the disappearance of those relationships, the remaining narration is about how the assemblage reconfigures to survive. The person whose species goes extinct still has a narrative role to play, so it's not an elimination.
Yeah.
In fact, going extinct results in more narration because you get to tell a scene of the last living member of your species.
Oh.
So, and then we get to tell memories and legends. And one of the coolest things I think about this is that based on the ecological relationship, some people's species are devastated that these are gone. Some people are like, we hated them. We're so glad they're gone.
Yeah.
You get to have like the simultaneity of where one is like, wow, this is absolutely devastating. This other ecological relationship they had predisposes other species to be like, they were our predator and now we're free to reproduce. This is amazing.
I can imagine, like, based on what we've been talking about, it's like the parasite is probably like, there goes my fucking host.
Exactly.
Oh, no. Well, yeah, the prey is like, thank God. Yes.
So it's cool because it kind of models how community relationships are complicated. And like on the surface, it's sad, but in the reality of it, it's complex.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a thread of survival for the remaining species of how did they cling to life despite this huge shift. And that's kind of where it ends, is like understanding this transition in terms of loss and also continuance, basically. And it's because the rules dictate that, it is pretty consistent in how it plays out in terms of people finding a bunch of like rotating the crystal and looking at all the different facets of disaster for this community.
Right. I do like that. And like, I'll say, like, I think world building games that have a finite ending, I really like it when they do that. Like, I think there's something really beautiful about like all the ways that you lead up to a thing that we know is going to happen. And that's like really cool. I really like that. And I like thank you for spoiling it for me, because I was truly really interested and want to play it to know about like, okay, like how do you then handle, like, how is it handled that these creatures just can go extinct, and the vote and the one is so cool.
Yeah.
And I think it's still like, the thing, it's like both of our games are about climate change and how shit sucks.
Yes.
Or how like, in our worlds are dying, and how does that affect, in my case, like society, and then how does that, in your case, affect wildlife? I love that it's just one thing going on, like one thing going extinct ripples. And I think that's so much more powerful than just like, oh, we all die. It's like, oh, here's the end of the world. But it's like, no, we lose. Like, I think a lot about like, it's like, oh, if we actually do just remove mosquitoes from the world because nobody fucking likes mosquitoes, ecological disaster. Like that is a massive food source for so many different animals. And if they don't have mosquitoes, then we don't have this. Like the domino effect is insane. So it's like, I love that. Specifically.
Yeah. I mean, it's instead of a flutter of a butterfly's wing, it's a flutter of a mosquito's wing, right? Like chaos ensues, but
chaos and stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, but we should stop because we could go on forever, which is like makes this. Honestly, I do feel like we should just get coffee and talk about game design.
We do.
Yeah.
We should and we will.
Yes.
Is the thing. Yeah.
But for the folks who would be tuning in now or listening to this later, let's talk about what we're doing with these projects right now, what we would love folks to check out or focus on, and let's talk about A Land Once Magic to start. I'll turn it pink so you can talk about your campaign, which I'm really excited that this is going to exist as a beautiful book.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this game. You're gonna get, if you're a book freak, it's an A6 open spine Coptic stitch book, which is cute and fun and all of the words that I think make book people excited. Because it's small, it's open spine, it's gonna have nice paper, and also if you back at like our slightly deluxe version, you get a bag and a notebook. And the notebook, we're currently trying to hit a stretch goal to make the notebook nicer, because right now the notebook's like, it's a place where you jot down all your world building ideas as you play, but now it's like, oh, let's make the notebook good as well. And you all put it in a bag, in like a drawstring bag, and I will hand stamp every bag. So if you do get that, you get a fun little personalized. Well, I mean, they're all the same stamp, but they're all hands. So you can know that.
But you actually did this,
yeah.
So that's very clutch.
Yeah. That's every single process. But yeah, that's kind of like, that's what we're kind of building towards, is just making that notebook a little nicer. So the entire little deluxe pockety, you could toss the bag in a bag and toss the drawstring bag in your backpack and take it with you and stuff.
And I will turn it blue to talk about Assemblage. And I mean, our game, if this is your first time hearing about it because you're coming from A Land Once Magic as a backer, we are making a boxed game. So this comes as a deck of cards in a small box that's easy to carry with you. Everything you need to play the game, except maybe like a pencil or a pen, is in the box. And we are just trying to, honestly, our stretch goals are just to make the box and the cards really nice. So it's a really beautiful tactile experience to play with them. Mm-hmm. We're funded, and we have a stretch goal of making the cards be tarot sized. I think if we don't hit that, we'll make a playing card size deck, but we would love to, obviously, because tarot cards are the best, and that like form factor is so satisfying. So if we get there, we'll try to make the deck a tarot deck, tarot sized. Of course, the cards have text based prompts and beautiful art by our artist, who is a cryptid artist and is going to be making all kinds of really cool, weird looking creatures that you'll be able to see in the guidebook and on the cards. So it's going to be a really, hopefully, at least for me, it's going to be awesome. And I'm hoping there's other folks who will enjoy having a deck of weirdness as much as I'm going to. So
that was, by the way, that's a whole thing that we didn't even get to talk. I was like, I kind of want to talk about how your intersection of role playing and board game, because this feels very like the form factor is very board game. And but it's, it's role playing, but we don't have time for that. I wanted to talk about your production and your thought.
Believe me, I know. I mean, that's my secret desire to like entice board game people into role playing, because when you don't have to play a character, you just have to say some stuff like anyone can do it. So
it's a storytelling game. It's not an embodiment game.
Exactly. Right? Like we're just like enticing people into our world.
It just takes an hour. That's a board game,
Exactly. No commitment. But okay, we should stop though. This was so much fun. Thank you. I really enjoyed talking to you. We should leave people on the note that I feel like you could play these games together, and there would be a land where the magic is draining away that also contains a ecological assemblage from my game, and playing within that would be ridiculously cool. So
I'm figuring it out. I think I know in my where you stop playing my game and then go play Assemblage. I think it's like you build your world on a broad scale, and then you don't make a city, you don't get into all the other stuff. Then you move to Assemblage, and then you see that world all the way to the end through the eyes of this ecosystem. So I think that's where I would do it, and I'd want to try that.
Heck yes. We should definitely try to do it. So listeners can stay tuned, because maybe there will be a second duet project for us to do as designers. But
I think that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's sign off. Thank you for listening, for watching later. If you did, this was a fantastic designer thing, and definitely check out the projects if you haven't. More world building is always a thing that we need, and so grateful for Pocketopia for bringing both of these projects into the world.
Yay!
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.